Hey guys, the Explorer 4 here. Welcome back to the Wes Craven movie reviewing marathon of October. An update. I still have not found a name for this. Maybe call it the Craven-thon? I don't know. I don't know about that one. But welcome back to the marathon. Of course, we are discussing various horror films that Wes Craven's made over the course of his career. And we're doing this in memory of Wes Craven. And today we're getting to one of my top 10, possible top 5 favorite horror films of all time. And I really do think this is a movie that people should study, should watch on how to do characters, how to do interesting plot idea. And it's just a film that should be studied for how it was made with very little money, very little time. A lot of these greatest horror films of all time, I've noticed, are all low budget, made for just no money at all, struggles, and they end up being some of the better horror films. I kind of wonder if that helps. I wonder if just the perseverance of the filmmakers, it ends up putting more heart into these films, versus nowadays you can shoot a whole horror movie on a green screen and use CG and not have to worry about anything. I am kind of curious about that. But Nightmare on Elm Street. Today's film we're talking about is A Nightmare on Elm Street. 1984, 7.4, written and directed by Wes Craven. Of course, the movie that spawned, well, not really spawned, but helped New Line Cinema become one of the biggest companies of the 80s and 90s. And Nightmare on Elm Street was also the movie that gained Wes Craven that mainstream notoriety. Because even though you had Hills Have Eyes, you had Last House on the Left, I think this one, for just the cultural impact it had, for the amount of money it made back, for just the amount of times this movie has been referenced and brung up, and I said it needs to be studied. I think it actually does get studied and talked about, whether in universities or just by film historians and people around the world that love film. Nightmare on Elm Street is always up there for most people, and there are some people that say this is the only good movie in the series. Sorry about that. I apologize. My phone is going off. Business is calling, I guess. Sorry about that. It's every time I try to do a Wes Craven review, there's always something trying to happen. I don't know if the galaxy is working with me with these reviews, but we're gonna keep on trucking along. But Nightmare on Elm Street, yeah, I mean, this is a film that, like I said, it's just without this movie, I think Wes Craven's name wouldn't have been put up into the stratosphere as far as it was, because I do think that Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes are masterpieces, are great films, but this movie impacted the culture in such a way where, I mean, after this, Freddy Krueger became an icon. And it became more about his one-liners and everything. And like I was saying before, most people would say this is the only good Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I think there's a lot of good ones in this franchise. I think it's weird because my favorite franchise might be Friday the 13th or Halloween. But this is the one that has, I guess on paper, it should be my favorite franchise. Because the first 4 I absolutely love. The first 4 are some of my favorite horror films. I actually really enjoy Part 5. I like Part 6. I really, really love Part 7. I even really enjoy Freddy vs. Jason. The only one that I don't like is the remake. And yeah, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of reasons why I don't like that. And there's hundreds of thousands of people out there that don't like it either. But anyways, looking back at this first movie is interesting because Freddy Krueger in this first movie, what I love about the character is he's not a character that you see a whole lot of. In the first 3 Nightmare on Elm Street movies, it's much more about the cast. It's much more about the characters. You know, Johnny Depp, Heather Langenkamp. You know, you got John Saxon, America Weiss, yeah. America Weiss! Sounds like America Chavez. Amanda Weiss, Renee Blakely, you know, Joe Garcia. Apparently, Joe Unger's in this movie? What? I'm sorry, y'all. I did not. Oh, I know who Joe Unger is. I think he's the guy in the police station who lost the keys. Where's the keys? That's Joe Unger. I've never, just right here recording this, just realized that was Joe Unger. Joe Unger, of course, is from Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3 as the guy with the hook for a hand and everything. I actually really like his character from that movie. That's cool. I never realized he looks so different in this movie. But yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street, this first one and the second one and the third one, it's much more about the cast of characters. And I mean, at this time, even though this is pretty close to a slasher movie, I think it's much more than that. I think it's a slasher horror film. I think this is a film that tries to really make you feel bad for these characters, feel sympathy for them. And it's not just a bunch of horny teens going to a summer camp and being, slaughtered. It's different than that. There is death scenes, but it's not a big giant body count. There's a lot of good special effects in this franchise, and not just for the gore, but for just the fantasy element. The idea that your dreams can kill you. And it's an idea that's so classic, so well done in this first movie, that it made it really original and it made it stand out. And fun fact, this is the first horror film that I remember watching all the way through and being absolutely scared of. Like, I grew up with Jason, I grew up with Michael Myers. Those movies never scared me. This one scared me. I mean, I love Friday the 13th, I love Halloween. Those movies never creeped me out. They never did what this movie did. And I actually remember the first time I watched this movie, I watched it on an original Nightmare on Elm Street VHS tape with the classic-looking poster and all. And I watched this and Phantasm. And I remember Phantasm. You think Phantasm would creep me out even more, but it's ironic that I remember Phantasm being more boring. Of course, I don't feel that way anymore. I don't think Phantasm is boring at all. But when you're a kid that young watching Phantasm, it's like, this is slow. But this one, I remember specific scenes where I got up and ran out of the room screaming and like crying. I was pretty young when I seen this. I just remember sneaking off and watching this movie, and there were scenes that freaked me out. And just the idea of Freddy Krueger being able to kill you in your dreams was such a creepy, scary thought, such a creepy, scary idea that as a kid, I mean, that was terrifying. I had nightmares of Freddy Krueger. And for a long time, this is the one I grew up with. I didn't grow up with the sequels. I grew up with this one. And so to me, Freddy Krueger for the longest time was always scary. He was never a joke, never one-liners and stuff like that. It was serious, creepy Freddy. And yeah, this is the movie that got me into horror, if I'm being real. I mean, growing up with Halloween, Friday the 13th, I always knew I liked scary movies in a way, because I always found myself watching Jason and Halloween and stuff. But this is the one where after this movie, it was like, okay, I'm going to start collecting. I'm going to try and start getting into this at a very young age. I mean, I was a kid, and I just wanted to watch more horror movies. I was just obsessed with horror movies. Still am. Still going strong. But yeah, this is the movie that started it all. And I know it's like, well, almost 10 minutes in, no plot. It's Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, if you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street, go check it out. This is an absolute classic masterpiece. It's one of my top 5 favorite horror films. And in all honesty, nowadays, it doesn't get brung up a lot. You hear a lot about Part 3. And I love Part 3. Don't get me wrong. Part 3 is my favorite of the series. But this one is like up there a close second. Like, this is a perfect horror film. Part 3 just so happens to be having a bit more of a fun nature to it. But this one, I think, is just one of the most iconic, classic, scary, creepy horror films of all time. And the story, you've got these teenagers on Elm Street having nightmares about this guy with these razor blades for fingers. And some of the friends end up getting killed off one by one. They realize this person is Freddy Krueger, this sort of dream slasher, this guy who can kill you in your dreams. And it basically ends up becoming Nancy becoming one of the last survivors and having to figure out how she's going to stop this guy. Because you can't kill him. He's in dreams. He's got full control of everything in the dreams. And you can't just stay up forever. You've got to sleep eventually. And she's got to figure out how to deal with this problem that she has. And Nightmare on Elm Street, from the writing to the characters, to the acting, to the direction by Wes Craven. I love how he directs this movie. Lots of natural lighting in this. Not a whole lot of like bright reds and blues and stuff that you would get later on in Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's very heavy lighting. Here, it's a lot of shadows and darkness and natural boiler room lighting. It's really dark. This movie is extremely dark, and I think he exercised that skill at utilizing darkness and shadows very well in The Hills Have Eyes. I mean, you go back and watch The Hills Have Eyes, the way he films the desert at night, it just brings an atmosphere to it. And the way that Freddy Krueger in this movie is filmed at a distance or from the side or at extreme close up, you very rarely in this movie get a center frame of Freddy Krueger. Of course, played wonderfully by Robert Englund. I mean, Robert Englund's one of my favorite actors, a person that seems like such a wonderful, warm human being, warm soul, and all of his interviews are just so great to listen to. And I remember I had this thing called Boogeyman, the Killer Compilation. His commentary was wonderful. I low-key want Robert Englund to do what Joe Bob does and just pick some of his favorite horror films and just do commentaries over them. Like, I would love that. Would y'all love that? I would love that. I would love for Robert Englund to do a commentary. I have it right here. That's why I'm saying it. But, like, I'd like to see him do a commentary for Hellraiser. That would be, like, so cool. Or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Just these movies that he really likes. And I think he'd be great for commentaries because he did a great commentary for the Boogeyman collection. Which is a fun little nostalgic DVD where it's a collection of different clips from horror films. But yeah, Robert Englund's performance is amazing. I think the rest of the cast does their jobs well. I like Tina, Rod. I think Johnny Depp is okay as Glenn. I think he's definitely a little rusty here in his first performance. I think Heather Langenkamp is a perfect lead for this movie. One of the best leads. Great actress. Wonderful job here. John Saxon, I think, does a pretty good job as the father. The mom character, I thought, Renee Blakely, I thought she did pretty good as the mom. I know a lot of people roast her performance and say how she's an awful actress. I think that's terrible. That's terrible. I mean, come on, y'all. We ain't watching an Oscar movie. I mean, there's some things, like the special effects could get awards and stuff, but this is a horror movie. Like, I'm over here like, what were they expecting from these performances? But they're serviceable. They're fine. They do their jobs well. The cast is likable. I like all the characters. The fun banter between them. I think Heather Langenkamp is a wonderful lead. How she takes no shit and screw sleep. Why don't you take that? Or I was gonna say take that to your goddamn therapy. That's part 4 though. Forgot about that. That's a different actress, character, and all. But yeah, so many classic scenes. I mean, the scene where the introduction of Freddy Krueger is one of the scariest scenes ever in horror. And just being a kid, I got goosebumps, and I was just, the hairs in the back of my neck stood up, and I was just creeped out at that idea of the shadow figure of, like, Freddy walking through the alleyway and his arms growing, and it's like, whoa. And how he can cut his fingers off and not even worry about it, and his face getting peeled off. Or the phone scene, I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. That is so skin-crawling. That is so creepy. The bed sequence where... that is literally one of the scenes. Like, I really do think that this movie is so goddamn scary because there's so many scenes that I can remember that still creep me out, but when I was a kid, really scared me. Like the scene of Glenn being dragged down into the bed is a great image, first of all. It's pulled off well. And the just gallons of blood just spraying out of the bed. I mean, that was so disturbing and scary to me as a kid. That was so terrifying. I just love the way that these dream sequences are filmed, how they do feel a bit fantasy. They feel a bit random. And that's good because dreams are random. There's no logic in dreams. So there may be 1 minute where you're walking in an alleyway and all of a sudden you're in front of a police station out of nowhere. Or you're walking in a boiler room, but it leads to a house. It just doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to. It really captures the idea of dreams and nightmares very well. And I love the simplicity of the makeup on Freddy Krueger in this movie. It's a much more, I guess, more realistic look for a burn victim. It's a lot more creepier. Freddy is just so goddamn creepy and scary in this movie. He's a polar opposite of what he would be in stuff like parts 5 and 6. And I definitely think this is better. Him being scary is a lot better. But yeah, I love even the uniqueness of the look of the sweater in this movie, and how the sweater isn't all striped. It's just solid arms, and the little stripes are on the shirt. I think that even sticks out. Yeah, there's just iconic scene after iconic scene after iconic scene. And I mean, really, the ending I like. Well, not the very ending, but the ending of Nancy setting up all the booby traps and Freddy being set on fire. Nice fire stunt. I love how at the end, this is all just a dream. You're full of shit. And it's just like, I love how she stands up to Freddy Krueger, man. She fights him back. And it's a really good moment of her rising up against her fears and just turning away from the evil and it disappearing. The very ending, I think, is a problem. I think it's a problem for a lot of people, including me. It's kind of a fun ending, but it's not what they intended. Where Nancy realizes she's still in a dream, and Freddy comes through and grabs the mom and pulls her through a window, looking like a mannequin. It looks terrible. The original ending was a lot more ominous. I thought that would have worked a lot better. I don't think it's shocking. I don't think it's scary. It didn't even make me jump as a kid. And I was scared shitless because of this movie, and it didn't make me scared. So, didn't work then, doesn't work now. I don't think it'll ever work. I think it was a mistake to put it there, because it's not very effective. But regardless of that, man, Nightmare on Elm Street is a giant film with a lot of elements to it that work, and I think is just one of those examples of one of the best ones out there. And it was cool finally getting to this one on the Wes Craven marathon. Yeah, there's not really much else I can add, man. I mean, it's just a great film, a masterpiece, one of my favorites. I love the music. I think the music, speaking of the music, I think it's underappreciated. I love the style of the music in this movie, where it's 80s, but it's early 80s synth, and it kind of had its own sound to it. Love the soundtrack in this movie. Absolutely great soundtrack. But yeah, the makeup effects, the special effects for the low budget, the scene of Tina being murdered is like one of the most iconic horror scenes too. I mean, I just can mention so many scenes. The bathtub scene, the school nightmare where she's seeing the body bag dragged to the hall. Just so many great scenes. I love this movie so much. It's one of my favorites. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. It's one of the most perfect horror films out there. And I think it's an example of a film that if you put all your effort into, you get a great piece of cinema. And it's definitely, Wes Craven is responsible for how big New Line Cinema got. This movie was a huge hit. And it's cool this movie works so well, It's cool it works so well, and I'm glad it was made. And yeah, it's a very important part of history, man. And so, yeah, really enjoy Nightmare on Elm Street. But anyways, y'all, thank you guys so much for watching. Comment down below your guys' thoughts on this movie. Do you like Nightmare on Elm Street? Do you not like Nightmare on Elm Street? Comment down below in the comments. In the description below, I will be leaving a link to my social media stuff. So if you guys want to follow me on there, you guys can. But anyways, y'all, that's going to do it for Nightmare on Elm Street. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care. And the Explorer of Horror is out. Peace.